Hi everyone! Last week, i.e. earlier today, I made Claire Saffitz Easy Apple Galette from her book What's for Dessert. This week, I'm going to make her Apple Tart recipe from Dessert Person. At the end, I'll give you my honest opinion about which is easier to make and which one I liked best. So come bake with me. To start the rough puff pastry, I put 1.5 sticks of butter in the freezer so that can get super cold so that I can grate it on a cheese grater. Then I'm going to put my dry ingredients in this bowl and mix those up and put that in the freezer while I wait for the butter to get cold enough to grate. So here we go. So we start with flour, sugar, and salt. Running out of salt. Need to put more salt in the salt shaker, or salt cellar. All right, now we're gonna whisk this up, put it in the freezer too. Haha. Funny, I'm gonna get this enormous bowl in the freezer until the butter is ready. By reorganizing my entire freezer, I got that bowl in. So now I'm gonna take the rest of the butter and I'm gonna cut it into approximately 1/4-inch squares, and this is gonna go in the fridge while I wait for the other butter to basically freeze. This is going in the fridge. It's been 10 minutes. I took the flour out and now I'm going to grate it. Oh, whoops. Hang on. Forgot. I have to unwrap the butter and coat them in the flour. Then I'm going to grate them. Definitely looks like I grated cheese. Take the butter from the fridge, put it in the dough, and I'm gonna toss to coat. And then we're gonna put in the water. She uses a fork. I'm going to use a pastry cutter because that's easier for me. Large piece of plastic wrap down. This is where we're going to put our dough. Any dough that's, cohesive, I guess. A little bit more water to bring this more floury bit together. For the tart, we're going to start off by making the apple compote. So we're going to peel and core, I already peeled them. We're going to core the apples and then roughly chop them. These don't have to be perfect, just a rough chop. For a tart, we're going to start by adding butter, brown sugar, water, which I find very satisfying to pour over the brown sugar. She says the vanilla beans of 1/2 of a vanilla bean. I don't have a vanilla bean, but I did find vanilla paste, so I'm going to put in that much. I don't know how much that was. Some, I guess. And then salt. I'm going to heat that up. We're basically making a caramel here, seems like. Alright, now we're at the swirling stage until the bubbles are large and slow to pop. Alright, I'm going to add in my apples. I'm going to do this away from me so I don't accidentally splatter myself with any molten sugar, which I've done and super do not recommend. Our apples are just starting to take on color, so I'm going to very carefully and slowly add in the apple cider. Very carefully, because I don't want to get burned.
Through the magic of editing, this is going to be reduced by a significant amount. Alright, we're bubbling away, so I'm going to mash my apples. I hate my potato masher. If you have one that you like, leave it in the comments, because I really need a new one. Okay, we're going to let that continue reduce. Oh, there's an apple. We're going to let that continue reducing until it's like down to just a cup. Finally starting to make progress. I think I'm going to mash it with the potato masher one more time and see if I can't get those bigger pieces to be smaller. Alright, almost there, just maybe a few more minutes. Alright, I think we're there. Leave that hole, it doesn't immediately cover the bottom of the pan as we drag the spoon across the bottom. Now we're going to let this cool, and we'll build our apple tart tomorrow because it's already 9 o'clock. See you in the morning. It is the next day, and I have taken my rough puff pastry out of the fridge and floured my work surface. Now we're going to try and roll it out. It's still pretty crumbly. I'm sure it will produce a flaky pastry, but I'm a little dubious about rolling it out. I took it out about 5 minutes ago and it's still pretty cold. So we're just gonna go slow with it and be patient and hope it gets there. And of course, work around the cracks. I'm gonna trim this. So what we really need here is 13 by 9 inches that aren't cracked and falling apart. Alright, so now we're gonna trim off our issues, and suddenly it'll look a lot better. Okay, it's gonna be slightly smaller than called for, but this gets me a decent rectangle without any real issues. There we go. Look at that. Now it looks mostly great. And now we put it on our cookie sheet. To easily lift it, I'm just going to roll it up on my rolling pin gently, using my bench scraper if it gets stuck anywhere. It's not perfectly square. That's okay. We're going to brush an egg wash along 1 inch of the edges. That'll make our border. Making sure I get everything well coated, but I don't want to get it on the silpat because I want it to be able to puff up if that's what the dough is going to do. And I don't want to glue it down to the silpat. Ask me how I know not to do that. That's a little bit more than 1 inch, but that's as wide as my pastry brush is. So now we're gonna brush it with Demerara sugar, or sprinkle it with Demerara sugar, just along the edges. Now we're going to dock the dough, i.e. put little holes in it so that the air can escape. Now, back into the fridge this goes while I slice the apples. Perfect. Instead of coring the apples, she kind of does this neat little slice in half. I think I went too far on that one. And you end up with a square core, and all of these are about the same size except for this one where I went too far in. I'm going to do that to all the apples. This is nice because then you get a nice flat surface to cut on. You don't have to worry about your apples rolling away on you. Alright, she says to keep your groups of apples together so that you can line them up. So that's what I'm going to do. This also helps you get them to be about the same thickness. I noted. Gotten our chilled pastry dough out of the fridge, and now I'm going to pile on the apple compote that we made yesterday. Just going to dab some on. I'm probably not going to use all of this because, well, there's a lot. But I'm going to use a generous amount. And now we're going to arrange our apples. I'll take one group of apples and sort of fan them out. She says we probably won't need all of them, which is fine. It's easier to fan if you go from bigger to smaller. Alright, that looks good. Now we're going to take some melted butter, and I'm putting in my, what is this, apple cider. And mix this up, and then I'm going to brush it on top of the apples. As per the recipe, I preheated the oven to 425. I'm going to put the apple tart in, and then we're going to reduce the temperature to 350 so it gets that shock of heat, but then it doesn't bake at 425. And we're going to cook it for 50 minutes, I think. All right, we're beeping. Similar to the galette, she does an apricot glaze on top, and they came out of the oven looking good but kind of dull, so I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to combine apricot jam with apple cider and heat that up. Seems pretty well combined. Pass it through we're going to pass it through the sieve so that we get a nice clear liquid for brushing on our apples. Pastry brush is getting a workout with this recipe. See, the apples are looking kind of dull, but as soon as I brush the glaze on it, they look nice and shiny and pretty. Alright, we're going to let that cool until it's cool enough to eat. I wanted to get audio of cutting this because it's so crispy. It makes such a wonderful sound. Come on.
Here are my final thoughts. The apple tart is quite good. The apple compote under the apples adds to the appley flavor, and the pastry is so crisp that, except for the very center of the tart, I was able to pick it up and eat it rather than cutting it with a fork. The pastry is also easier to work with than the galette pastry, though still not easy compared to some other recipe of pastries or pie recipes that I've tried in the past. I continue to have issues with cracking and getting the dough to come together using this recipe. Also, for a puff pastry, it didn't puff, like at all. I did go back and check my temperatures and they were correct, so I'm not sure why it didn't puff. Like the galette, she does give instructions for using pre-made puff pastry, and again, if you're not someone who wants to struggle with your pastry, it's definitely worth it to save yourself the headache. A casual reading of these two recipes suggests that they are very similar, but they are very much not. Both have their own texture, and while the apple is the main flavor in both, it's highlighted by different background flavors. So, which is better? Well, truly, that's up to you. But I will say that both Nat Cat and Mike preferred the galette, and honestly, I do too. Even with as much difficulty as I had getting the pastry to come together, it was the more flavorful of the two. Also, as implied by her ratings in the books, the galette is the easier of the two recipes, especially if you make pre-made puff pastry. Though both are a great option for a fall dessert when the weather is just starting to turn chilly and the apples are fresh. If you've made it this far, thanks so much for watching. As always, if you have a recipe you'd like to see me try, please put it in the comments down below. And if you have not done so, please consider subscribing to my channel and following along as I try more recipes that are supposedly for the home cook. And like this video if you enjoyed it. I'll see you next week.